Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You guys might have witnessed the fact that I'm walking around with a limp. That's because I tried to tell Dr. Monroe no one time. It is great. Before us, we're going to have a really nice panel discussion. And let me set the stage that none of us are historians, okay? So we may not get exact details down, but we're going to come from the perspective of what does this mean to us. And as I was reading over some of the history, particularly as I read over Reverend Garnet's message to Congress, you know, it reminded me of the speech, well, not the speech, the writing, the letter from Dr. Martin Luther King from the Birmingham jail. Because each one of those messages, they were directing their message to someone who should have known. Reverend Garnet to legislators and people who make law, but understanding that they make the law, but they don't carry the law out. Dr. King to pastors who understand what needs to happen, but refuse to make it happen. So I thought that was a great correlation, and it just really hit me the fact that, you know, before Dr. King, we had a Reverend Garnet who did the same thing, resilience at his best. So we have a panel here, and I'm going to let each one introduce themselves, but these are esteemed panelists. We got them from far, far away. It costs us a lot of money to get them. So I'm going to have each one just give their name and just what they're thankful about this weekend.
Oh, I got to start off?
Is it on?
Oh, that's got to stay connected. Oh, wait. Oh,
You turn up.
No, no, no,
Testing?
you're good. Yeah, you're good.
Am I good now?
Is it on? Flip it on. Nope, just hit the button up.
It is on.
And then you might have to turn it up there.
I have a very loud voice.
Just start talking.
Okay, well, I'll just keep talking. My name is Sheila White. Did I get that out right? Sheila White. This weekend has meant a lot. I've got to meet a lot of new people today, to be exact. Oh, where you at? So there's so many I can't number, put a number to it. But I also got to read a little bit more.
I'll say, let's move our chairs like this so we can face them. So I was saying, move your chair this way so that you can face the
Guess
audience.
I'm the tester. I also got to read a little bit more on Henry Highland Garnet, and I'm a person that likes a little bit of poetry, and he wrote so many great quotes, and so I had the enjoyment of reading those along with the speeches that he already made, and so many things stuck out that we've heard from leaders after Henry Highland Garnet, especially when it has the rise of the Phoenix. He did that in the 1800s. He also did the one about I'd rather die than be a slave. That came from him first. So those little points made me look that sometimes you have to look deeper and farther in history and see how sometimes we start from Martin Luther King and it goes way back before them. They learned from them. So.
Good evening. My name is Harriet McCray, and some of you here I know, and I've worked on committees with some of you. I'm a member of Grace, a lifelong member of Grace. We started a Garnet Society, how many years ago, Sheila?
We started in about, because I was there, it was about 1999.
About 1999. At the urge of Richard LeGrand, who is deceased now, Reverend Monroe, and Mary Evans. And the bishop called Sheila, and he called me. And we have been members of the Garnet Society, which is an outgrowth of the National Black Presbyterian Caucus. Henry Highland Garnet, being the first pastor of this church, Grace Memorial being the first African-American Presbyterian church west of the Allegheny, that makes him the first African-American Presbyterian pastor to serve in a presbytery west of the Allegheny. And we never think about that, and we never talk about that. But his spirit has lived on through all of the African-American churches within this city, who were all associated with Grace Memorial Presbyterian Church. All fought for freedom, for integration, for assimilation, for freedom and equality for everyone. And I see my niece, Reverend Jerry, who was a member of this church, who was ordained in this church, Reverend Maxine, who is an outgrowth. We talk about the men of grace, but there are female pastors who came through grace, who were ordained in grace. And whether a little known history of grace is, let me get her name right.
Carmen.
No. She was at COR. She was a student minister here. The first female, non-African American, who was a student pastor here at Grace Memorial Church, went on to become a pastor at COR. So Grace has a long history. All started with Henry Highland Garnet, and as long as I can remember, every pastor of this church and of the African American churches in Pittsburgh carried that spirit. If you think of them, Reverend Leroy Patrick, Reverend Jimmy Joe Robinson, all fought for freedom and equality.
Harry and Sister Rosalia is up here.
I'm sorry?
Up here. Sister Rosalia says Gail Buckwalter.
Yes,
Is that her name?
I'm sorry. Gail Buckwalter King was a student here at Grace Memorial Church before she was ordained as a pastor. So we've had a long history being a member of this presbytery.
That's our fact checker. So if we get anything wrong,
That's our church
They will-
historian
yes.
currently living in Texas.
Well, I don't know how you follow that up. But my name is B. Marshall, and my introduction to Reverend Henry Garnet is more on a social justice and civil rights leader and activist that he was. In 2013, we started the organization Stop the Violence Pittsburgh, and our first event was a Juneteenth celebration over at Stage AE in Pittsburgh, where we had about 25 people. In last year, 10 years later, we ended up having 50,000 people for our Juneteenth celebration. But in 2015, 2016, I was contacted by Sam Black of the Hines History Center, and he told me that I needed to come down to the Hines History Center to discuss something with him before we did the Juneteenth celebration. And as we were down there discussing things about the history of Pittsburgh and things of that nature, I walked around his exhibit, and I came across this poster right here that everybody has a copy of a piece of paper. And this is an original poster from 1870. And it was designed for a parade here in the city of Pittsburgh called the Jubilee of Freemen Parade, Grand Jubilee. And the Jubilee of Freemen Parade was organized as a result of passage of the 15th Amendment granting black men the right to vote. And the leader of this grand parade was Reverend Henry Highland Garnet. I didn't know anything about Henry Highland Garnet. But as I read the poster, and you'll have I think the slips, everybody has them out, you'll see that they organized this parade in such a way that they actually defined all the people that were in the unit, the people that organized in particular areas. They organized in three aspects of this parade. They organized Allegheny City, which is the north side now. They organized Pittsburgh, and then they organized what is called Birmingham,
which I thought was something strange, but then I found out it was the South Side. They were all individual cities. And what they ended up doing is they got together with a whole bunch of pastors in each congregation, in each division, in each church denomination. And I think it was over 50 pastors that organized their particular areas. So somebody was on the hill, organizing the hill. Somebody was on the north side, organizing the north side. And he listed the names of everybody. And he listed the divisions. And then I found that they listed the units that marched in the parade. And when I seen that inside of the Hines History Center, I said, oh, we got to bring that back. So in 2016, we started our Juneteenth Grand Jubilee reenactment parade of the parade that was conducted by Henry Highland Garnet and so many people here. At that time, they marched from downtown Pittsburgh up to the Lower Hill District up on Crawford, back downtown Pittsburgh to the north side, from the north side back over to Market Square. So this is without any cars, this is out, something to ride on. People had carriages and things of that nature. And it was such a fantastic parade. I could just see it in my mind that it was so splendid that I decided we need to try to bring this back and bring this to the community. And that's how I was able to actually come up to the church here and talk to the Historical Society. I met with John Ford. He's passed on. He was a great historian here in the church, along with Reverend Monroe. And since 2016, we've been working with them hand in hand and diligently to push forward the parade and to have people come in and be a part of our celebration. So we want to invite all of you Presbyterian members to come this year to be a part of the Grand Jubilee Parade in honor of Reverend Henry Highland Garnet, who started this parade in Pittsburgh. Thank you.
Give him the date, give him the date. Give him the date.
So the date is June the 15th. But we'll be giving you some notices for this coming up. Thank you.
My name is Eric Smith. I am a member here at Grace Memorial Presbyterian Church. I come and I talk about Henry Highland Garnet more so from an inspirational side, more so than the history side. We have learned the history. You can read about the history. But how does Henry Highland Garnet live today and affect today? And when I think about the many pillars that I stood next to, stood beneath, or whatnot, when I think about Dr. Johnny Moreau, I think about Reverend Samuel George, I think about Mr. Ford, I think about Mr. Curry, a lot of the guys in the church who took me under their wing and helped guide me throughout life. Also, when I think about the women, such as my mother, I think about Miss Joyce, I think about Miss McCrae, I think about Miss Williams and so many other people who have guided me. A lot of this comes from what Henry Highland Garnet stood for. And the main thing I take from Henry Highland Garnet is, regardless of what happened, from the amputation, from being born black in a time where being black was very dangerous, from a time of unrest, uneasy, speaking before people, there was never a moment where he lied on an excuse to not do something. So what wasn't there, he saw and made happen. And that's what I try to live my life doing now. I'm not someone who's very big on taking excuses from anyone, even for myself. It is, what do you want to have happen, and how do you go about doing it? When you see the world falling and it's in rubble, you look at the pillars that stand strong for faith, not at the rubble and despair. That's how I look at it.
That was beautiful.
So you can see that we have a great panel, and sorry about that.
No.
And so that was the answer. Let me see if I have anything left.
Good night, everybody.
And I say we don't have any story. All right, so here's a question. Born into slavery, escaped, had a rough education, became a minister, reached back to help others. These are all examples of being resilient and determination. If there was a message that you can give to folks today, what message would you give to people who feel that they are trapped?
Well, I'll start off.
Everyone said at one time.
Yeah, I'll start off. So what I do in my life is that when I come across things that I think may be obstacles or difficult things to overcome, I draw on the strength of our ancestors and look at that history from what they have overcame to put me in the position that I'm in today, to accomplish the things that I'm able to accomplish. So that's why, to me, history is so important, that you really have to study your own history and your own culture to understand what your people have came through. And you understand you come from a mighty people, like a strong people, that it's nothing weak about us. So it's never a time that I feel that I can't accomplish something. I just try to figure out how I can find a way.
I think he answered that best for everybody. Yeah.
Anyone else want?
Go ahead.
No?
My parents grew up in this church. My mother joined when she was 16 years old. So it has been a family history, and I was told by everyone in this church and every pastor of this church and at home, there is no such word as can't. That's not part of your vocabulary. An obstacle is a bump in the road. It just pushes you forward, and you keep going. There's no such thing as a struggle. It's all an education. It all gives you what you need to do to go forward. What you need to know to not repeat it. And what you need to know to pass on. My family, and I consider this church my family, they all were involved in my education. There was no such thing as not getting an education. No such thing as not going to school. And A was not something that you were rewarded for. It's something you were expected to achieve. My mother's saying was, it's a poor day that you don't learn something. You learn something every day. So an A is not something unusual. It's what you do. You don't do anything less. And I guess it was the spirit of Henry Garnet that went through this church. We had youth groups. I think Eric was part of them. We had, I think Alex was part of the youth group. We had a group for men, not just Grace. It existed in every one of the African American churches in the city. They all had a youth group. So Henry Highland Garnet left his mark on this city. There was no such thing as can't. No word, not a word. And no such thing as failure. And nothing less than a name. That's what you do.
Great.
Yeah.
I have a final question to ask everyone. And a lot of times when, you're on social media or you're asked this question, I say, if you can bring back anybody, what would you bring back and why? So my question to the panel, and if we can try to keep it short, but with a good answer, if Reverend Garnet, if we can bring him back, and he was sitting in that first pew, what question would you have for him and why?
How?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Is that short enough?
Yeah.
Yeah. But how? How did you push through? How did you manage to
Right.
be so resilient? How did you not give up? And I have a feeling that the answer would be what the answer always is: God.
Thank
My
you,
God.
God.
Because I completely echo what Mr. Marshall said, what Ms. McCray said. It is about knowing your history. It is about education. And in today's world, there's no need to not know something. One of my biggest pet peeves is when someone says, "What is this?" while holding a cell phone. When you have Google, you have YouTube, you have all the answers right there. But it is a lot of information. How you discern what's the right information? So many people telling you so many different things. The third part of knowing your history and the education is being steeped in God's Word. That will help guide you to what information to know. So, although my first question would be, how did you do it? I kind of think I know what the answer is by God's grace.
Amen.
Yes.
Go ahead, Harry.
I'm not sure what question I would ask him. I was thinking about that and reading some of his history and some of the things he did, in addition to how, would be why.
Oh,
He had so many, what shall I say, things that were created to prevent him from doing what he did. It might have been easy to say, that's it, I'm not doing it. Also, the obstacles that he overcame. No matter what happened, he kept pushing. So the question, why did you do that? Not just for you, but he did it for everyone around him. So the question for us, how and why? Why do you do what you do? How do you do what you do? After you answer that question, why? What do you do then do?
Matt, I think I'd say thank you, because through him, we got the 13th Amendment. He did a lot in helping that get passed, and through that, that's helped generations of people. So I think I'd say thank you, because, that's what I'd say.
So she stole my thought,
Sir.
because that's what I was going to say. I would say thank you, and thank you for continuing to leaving a legacy for us to follow. And we appreciate your sacrifice and everything you've done. So thank you.
Great. So we've heard from the panel, and we know that there was tremendous sacrifice. Because how many of us would actually give up our time? I know for me, if something came up, I'm like, hey, I'm playing golf at 1 o'clock. I can't do it. But for him, he spent the time to make sure he had the sacrifice to make sure things got done. So let's give it up for the panel. Do we now know our history? Thank you very much, panelists. We really appreciate your thoughtfulness.